Why hello my fellow apes, I hope you are well. I am joined today by Ruis from Castles and Curiosities.
Yeah, I do loads of history stuff on my channel, specifically around the UK and a bit of our history, so
Absolutely.
If you're into that, come check it out.
Now, you most likely know Ruis from the Low Fruit series that we've been doing over the last month or two.
Yeah, tons of fun, that one, I love it.
Yeah, it's been absolutely awesome. And this video that we're responding to now was intended to be part of the next Low Fruit episode. However, it
wasn't entertaining enough.
Yeah.
But it is interesting.
It's very interesting. It's a very interesting claim. It comes up a lot. What Dennis Prager is arguing here is that without God, there is no meaning in life. There is no morality. These are two claims that come up all the damn time. But just as we were addressing it, we realised it doesn't really suit the Low Fruit style. So consider this a normal video, just with some good company.
Yeah. And I'm just here because we'd pretty much already done it. So enjoy.
Ultimately, it's the most important question the human being has to face, whether or not there's a God.
All right, so we're going to pause quite early on, 6 seconds in.
Yeah, nice and early.
Absolutely. And the reason for this is that we want to challenge Dennis Prager's claim here, because what he's saying is that the most important question in life is whether or not a God exists. And we don't think that's not the most important question. Now, I have to say, a younger Steve may have said, yes, it is.
Yeah.
What about younger Ruis?
Younger Ruis was pretty much reading books and playing video games. He didn't really think about important questions.
You see, I didn't have a life, even from like a young age. I was like, why are we here? What's our purpose? So, yeah.
Mine was, what am I going to play later?
Yeah, I'm jealous. I'm starting to get there later on. But what we think is the most important question has to be Leibniz's question.
Why is there something rather than nothing?
Why is there something rather than nothing?
Yeah, and I think that's the most important, because you've got to get something on the table in order to claim that something is God.
Yes. So you could say, just to be brief, and I cover this in a video which I'll link below and you can see on screen now, you're either going to answer it by going down the terms of a brute fact, this is Bertrand Russell, Sean Carroll, Stephen Hawkins, etc., or you can say that it's a necessary being. It's all loaded words. It's not relevant to this video, not so much, so we won't go into it, but check that video out if you're interested.
It's a good one. You won't come out of it very happy.
No, you won't be happy, because you'll end up buying a brute fact, which is horrible. Anyway, to Prager.
It's the most important question the human being has to face, whether or not there's a God, because of two huge reasons. One, if there's no God, there's no ultimate meaning to life. All of life is just random chance. It's a fluke. I have no more meaning than a pebble on Jupiter.
So there's a lot to unpack here. But crucially, in giving his first reason, he's actually given us two assertions. The first is that if there is no God, then there is no ultimate meaning to life.
If there's no God, there's no ultimate meaning to life.
And the second is that if there is no God, then all of life is just random chance.
All of life is just random chance.
It's just a fluke. It's a tornado sweeping through a junkyard and assembling a Boeing 747.
And I have some serious contentions with that last one, but let's tackle them in order.
Absolutely. We'll play him again, so you've got the full context of him making the first claim, that if there is no God, then there is no ultimate meaning to life.
If there's no God, there's no ultimate meaning to life.
I suppose the first thing we need to know is, what does he mean by meaning?
Yes.
How is Prager defining meaning? And it appears to be sort of this idea of a grand cosmological purpose, some goal of ours in the entirety of the universe to be achieved.
Absolutely. Now, I had a lovely conversation with Simon Edwards on Justin Brierley's Unbelievable, and he was basically claiming that atheists can't have purpose, they can't have meaning, they can't love. And what it came down to is that he was defining these words in such a way as to have eternal consequence.
Yeah.
This is what Prager's doing here with the cosmological part, right? He's saying that you don't have a purpose, or you certainly don't have an ultimate purpose, unless it's cosmological. Now, in terms of response, there's at least two that come to mind, okay? The first is, well, so.
Yes, who cares? Does it actually matter? Do we need a grand cosmological purpose?
No.
No. In fact, I would say this is just basically not being happy with what you have and hoping, desperately hoping, that there's more.
Yeah, it's just an appeal to emotion. It's saying, look, if this proposition isn't true, in this case it's God existing for Prager, then you're not going to see your loved ones again after you die. You're not going to live forever. You're not actually something that's super important to the cosmos. Okay? Like, There's nothing else to it. And I know that's difficult to be able to digest if you've been fed your whole life, or your culture teaches you that you really are important. To realise that you're not is like thinking that your whole life that you'd won the lottery and then all of a sudden you realise that you haven't. But in terms of logic, in terms of reason and rationality, this is just a complete appeal to emotion. So what is the answer?
But
so there's your first horn.
the answer that I would prefer to give is, does it have to be God?
No.
Does it have to be a Christian God? Certainly.
Oh, definitely not.
Well, under the Christian God part, what about Norse religion? Because the grand ultimate goal here, the cosmological purpose, the meaning of life, was finding great warriors to fight in Ragnarok.
Yes.
It was to dine in the halls of Valhalla, to be used by Odin to fight in Ragnarok.
Yep.
So there's an alternative meaning.
Absolutely. Now, I guess they could say there's still gods there, and the god's going to get you there. But what about Buddhism? And that?
Yeah, so in Buddhism, they consider life to be one of repeating cycles of rebirth. They call it samsara.
Yeah.
And it's considered to be suffering. So the ultimate goal, the meaning of life, is to escape that cycle of rebirth.
Yeah, get to moksha, nirvana.
So, and that's got no gods in it.
And it's explicitly a cosmological purpose. It's enlightenment. Get the hell out of this universe. Anyhow, let's get to his second claim.
All of life is just random chance.
Now, Prager here is guilty of a rather obvious black and white fallacy.
Yes! One of them.
And by the way, Debunked is now available to all of the US and most of Europe, so you can get your hands on it right now, which will be good. Might turn up before Christmas, can't promise anything. Now, Prager here, as I was saying, is committing a black and white fallacy. He's saying that your ultimate purpose either comes from God or it is completely and utterly arbitrary. It's just a complete fluke. Well, can you think of any other options?
Buddhism.
Like, it's,
and many others.
Samsara, like there's plenty of others. So there is an obvious black and white fallacy here. And another way that we could look at this is taking the works of Spinoza and his views on necessitarianism. If it is the case that the universe can only be one way, then by definition, it's not fluke. So there's just so many ways that this can be countered. And yeah, it's a black and white fallacy to say that it's just completely random. And also, if it does come from nature, which we'll expand upon a bit later, that's not random either.
And I think another way I'd want to approach this would be to ask, does Prager believe in free will?
Yes, he maintains libertarian free will.
Yeah. So does God have free will? I suppose he must.
He would say so.
So under God having free will, life is a fluke because he could have not made us.
That's true, yes. Yeah. By definition, it's not necessary that life exists under his worldview.
So life under God is a fluke.
It's contingent.
Yeah. And then if we go further with that sort of idea, is he says, we are no more important to the cosmos than a pebble is without God. But again, with God, that is still true, because if God created all, and God created all with a purpose, because I'm sure he didn't just randomly decide to make a pebble for no reason.
No, because he's an all-powerful being. He knows exactly what he's doing. He
so
made
in that
case, pebble with a purpose, a meaning.
So life and that pebble have equal purpose under God's creation.
Yeah, both of
which we're no more
meaning.
important.
People don't really wrap their minds around that reality. Life is ultimately, utterly meaningless if there's no God, if there's no designer, no creator.
Steve, does God have a designer or a creator?
No, he doesn't, Ruis.
No. Well, according to Prager's definition, then, God is meaningless, because it's meaningless if you don't have a designer or a creator, and God, by definition, doesn't have such a thing.
Yes.
God is meaningless.
Absolutely. That is what bleeds out of what he's stating there. And it also raises a very interesting question, and that is that can something that doesn't have ultimate meaning, in this case God, because he doesn't have a creator, can something that doesn't have ultimate meaning create something that does have ultimate meaning?
Us.
My intuition tells me no.
It doesn't make a lot of sense.
And I'd have to see a good argument to suggest that can happen, because after all, our meaning has to be embedded within the narrative of God, and God doesn't have meaning.
If our meaning is derived from something else that's granted it to us, can that meaning be greater than the being that granted it to us?
And another consideration, again, is samsara, the cycle of death and rebirth. This is just a straight-up refutation of Prager's position, because it is a cosmological purpose that doesn't require a god.
The ultimate meaning is to escape it.
Absolutely.
So it doesn't need God for that.
Nope.
That doesn't mean that people can't make up a meaning in order not to go crazy, and they do. It's called existentialism. You can't look in the mirror in the morning and go, "How you doing, meaningless, you bunch of molecules?" We can't do that. We would go nuts. The human being aches for meaning. By the way, that's one of the arguments I have for there being a God, a meaning giver. The fact that we need meaning.
So I really, really like this bit, because he's saying we need to know our meaning in order not to go crazy. But he then says we can invent our own meaning, but that it's not real. It's fake. The only true meaning is one that's issued by God.
Yeah. Yeah, I am definitely getting that.
But, well, you asked me earlier, as a child, as younger Ruis, did I think about the important questions? No. Does a child need to know this meaning? Because they're human and would go crazy without meaning.
Yeah, I mean, what does a child care about? Boobs, boobs, and boobs. They care about food, shelter, basically Maslow's hierarchy of needs is just all that bottomed here.
But yeah, they don't have the ability, generally speaking, to understand the questions.
Yeah.
Like, why are we here? And then that applies to, if he's applying this to life in general, isn't that also then true of just animals? How do they understand their meaning?
Yeah, their meaning is, can I get some food? Can I get some shelter? Like, that's perfectly fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, a further point to be made here is that in nature, the purposes that we get from nature, the biological imperatives, they're not random.
No.
It's not that it's just completely made up. So, for instance, a bee sacrifices her life in order to preserve the hive. That's selected for. She doesn't even have to reproduce herself. She just needs to ensure that her hive reproduces and successfully carries on in the cycle of life. And then,
it's not an individual survival, is it? It's the survival of species. It's the survival of life in general.
Yeah.
So as long as that continues.
Absolutely. There's a reason why we like heroes that sacrifice themselves for what we consider to be the greater good. They don't need to reproduce themselves. They're helping us reproduce by fighting for what we believe in and what will ultimately help us survive. These things are not just made up on the spot. They're not just like a roll of the dice, complete randomness, complete fluke. That's absolutely not the case. These things have biological imperative. They are not random. It's the opposite of what Prager says.
So the atheist has to be intellectually honest, just as we religious people have to be intellectually honest about the problem of suffering and so on. We have problems, they have problems. But they have to be honest, and many are. If there is no God, life ultimately has no purpose.
It's great that he says theists also have problems, i.e. suffering. Unfortunately, we don't agree that lacking an ultimate meaning in life is a problem.
Yeah.
So that isn't a problem for the atheist.
No,
I'm quite happy to admit life has no ultimate purpose. So.
Yeah, and we can rephrase it for Prager. He might want to say that if you're an atheist, and what he means is a naturalist, because again, you've got samsara and all the rest of it. If you're a naturalist, you have to admit that you don't have some grand cosmological purpose. Okay.
Yeah, all right.
Like,
it's
whatever.
not a problem.
This is it. He says it's a problem. It's not a problem. It's just, if it's a problem at all, it's a problem for our egos, which is not a logical problem. The problem of evil is a logical problem. How can there be an all-powerful, all-loving God, and yet millions of years before humans even exist, there's these sentient beings being burnt alive in wildfires? Children born with leukemia. Like, all of these things are just not what you would expect under the hypothesis of theism, so they genuinely have the problem of evil. Atheists, again, naturalists, don't have the problem of not being able to be, of not having a grand purpose. It's not a problem. Not intellectually. Maybe psychologically people struggle with this. I can understand that. Again, evolution has imbued us with an aggrandized sense of self-worth. But yeah,
I just also want to pick up on the way he sort of said that there as well, because this time he said life has no purpose without God, whereas earlier he was saying meaning.
Yeah.
And obviously what we interpreted, to be fair, the way he was using meaning to be this grand cosmological purpose. But now that he said life has no purpose without God, now that's a more general word here.
No,
and it's a lot smaller in scope, because what this claim would ultimately mean now is that even the goal of reproduction cannot exist without God.
We can make them up. I want to be a good father. I want to be a good husband. I want to be a good worker. I want to be a good person. But they're all made up. They don't inherently exist.
Right, so now we have some examples on the table. Good father, good worker, good husband, good person. We've got some examples of what he means by purpose, by meaning.
Mm-hmm.
Are they made up?
Again, no, they're not just completely made up. Then it's not just like a fart in the wind, right? This is things that have biological imperative. And just because something's natural doesn't mean it's right, but in terms of purpose, actually, it does answer what he's driving at here. In terms of meaning, it does answer what he's driving at here. Take father, right?
Yeah. Well, you want a good father. They're going to look after their children because they want their offspring to survive, to reproduce themselves. That's if you're going through the sort of evolutionary purpose, getting the offspring to survive, to reproduce themselves.
Yeah,
that is the purpose.
Yep. And even if it's not your offspring, you still want them subconsciously to reproduce.
So the good part there is being conductive to that goal.
Yeah, and the reason, just to finish it off, is that they've got your genetics, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if you didn't give birth to them. They've got your genetics still, because you're part of the same species and very closely related. But no, sorry, do continue.
No, let's say the aspect of good here is doing things on the path to achieving that goal.
Yeah.
So a good father isn't going to, I don't know, toss his kids in the bin and let them be taken away. No, he's probably going to make sure that they're cared for, and they've got adequate food, they've got entertainment to help them develop their minds and stuff like that. So,
and shelter,
yeah.
But you don't necessarily have to give the 2-year-old, an introduction to Kant's philosophy, because he's not going to understand it. But yeah.
So you don't need God to ascribe these goals to you. They're evolutionary imbued in you.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not completely made up, and this fluke kind of language that's used by apologists, it's used by theists in general, it's just not true. Evolution really does deal with this. It's not just made up. It's not just, you're not born with a blank slate. You are very, just as you have, specifically certain biological factors about you, the number of digits on your hand, the hairs that you have, where the hair grows, all of these things, they're not just a roll of the dice, and neither is your psyche. It's just not the case. But yes, go.
The second reason is morality. If there is no God, there's no ultimate meaning, and if there's no God, there's no ultimate good and evil.
Well, as he's just said, he's moving on to the second argument now, and that is that if there is no God, then there is no morality. Simple as that.
Good or evil.
So let's hear what he has to say.
So let me explain for the 50,000th time, and I may not be exaggerating in my life. That doesn't mean an atheist cannot be a good person. Of course, there were good atheists. There were good people who believed in Zeus. There were good Incas. There were good Mayans. There were good Buddhists. There are good atheists, of course.
Well, thank you very, very much for granting that there can be good non-Christians.
And the word good, right? So when you were younger and you're playing games and getting on with your life, I was just laying there in paralysis, trying to figure out what on earth the word good means.
Right. Yeah, well, it's got lots of meanings. So.
It's very hard to unpack, okay? But long story short, I think that good is a description of whether or not an action leads towards a certain goal. So if you're a consequentialist, you'll say something is good if it's going to increase the happiness of most of the people. It's as simple as that. If you want to put it in terms of evolution, something is good if it helps the species be preserved and successfully reproduce.
Well, I think he's defining good as what is told to us by the Bible, essentially.
Absolutely.
So he is meaning good in a sense of following Christianity. Yeah. And you don't have to be a Christian to still live up to the rules as described by Christianity.
Yes.
The problem with that, what constitutes a good Christian? Because it's going to be following the Bible.
Yeah.
So a good Christian, surely, will beat their slaves to a point that they can still recover.
Yeah, I mean, like, Christians don't like to admit this. They do everything they can to pretend it's not in there. But the Bible explicitly endorses slavery.
Yep.
The God that Prager believes in absolutely endorses slavery.
Mm-hmm.
Does he do this? No, but that would be a good Christian,
Yeah.
right?
So, a further example, obviously, killing all the men, little boys, and women who have known a man by lying with them.
Yep.
And then keeping the women, children that have not known a man for yourselves. Very much what the very Christian Anglo-Saxons did when they arrived in Britain.
It's even worse than that.
That is a good Christian act.
Absolutely. It's worse, by the way. They killed the little boys. It's only the little girls that they killed.
Yeah.
For what?
Yeah.
For what? That's Christian morality right there for you, okay? And then, stoning homosexuals, killing God's creatures because they're slightly different to what is the norm, the standard, which we now know is absolutely natural. You find homosexuality right the way through pretty much any social species.
Yeah.
And
so,
if
he means good by following Christian ethics, by modern standards, these ethics are, well, not ethical.
No.
They're monstrous.
So what does he mean by being good? He means living up to what he interprets as good. And he may... What happens
It can be
is,
anything he wants it to be.
Yeah, he's a product of his culture. He decides what he thinks good. Women having some rights or equal rights or whatever it might be, even though that's not what's been the case throughout almost all of the history of Christianity. And then what he does is he will read the Bible in order to get the position that he already holds. Yes. Morality supersedes the Bible. It comes way before the Bible. And this is known as cafeteria Christianity. And every Christian does it.
But if there is no God, in the final analysis, if there isn't a moral God, then murder isn't wrong. If there isn't a God who says murder is wrong, then who says murder is wrong? My society? Well, many societies said murder is right. So it can't be society. Is it my conscience? Obviously, a lot of people who have done enormous evil have lived very well with their conscience.
So Prager is just wrong here. No society can say that murder is right because, by definition, murder is wrong. It literally means unlawful killing.
Yeah.
If they're going to kill people, they're going to think that it's justified. They're not going to define it as murder. Murder literally means that it's unlawful. So what we're dealing with here, and I'll put a bit of Hume on the table, is analytic and synthetic statements, okay? Now, a synthetic statement, or a synthetic proposition, is a truth, if any, that derives from how their meaning relates to the world. Here's an example. All creatures with hearts have kidneys. We're going to have to conduct empirical research to find out whether or not that's true. Whereas analytical propositions are true or not solely by virtue of their meaning. So an example of this is that a bachelor is not married. Now imagine if Prager was saying here that without God, some bachelors are married. No,
it doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't make any sense because a bachelor is defined as someone who's not married. There is no instance. It's just analytically, by definition, it's just the case that a bachelor is not married.
Yeah.
So you don't need a God to say that murder is wrong because murder is by definition wrong.
Yeah.
Same is true of theft.
So what you'd need to say instead is that if there is no God, then killing is wrong. But that doesn't work.
Yeah.
Because the Christian Bible's fine with killing.
Yeah, and actually, say self-defense, everybody's okay with killing under very certain circumstances.
What he's doing is conflating killing and murder. And when he's saying a person's conscience, they're not justifying murder, they're justifying the killing.
Yeah.
And that's obviously no different to a religion trying to justify it.
Yeah.
Well, we don't need religion to create the law that says these things are wrong. Obviously, they're defined as wrong.
Yeah.
But we don't need the law to say killing in these instances is defined as murder. We've made those laws for obvious reasons.
Biological imperatives.
Well, and no society, because he used a society answer, well, no society is going to allow killing without restrictions. It's going to collapse if everyone can just kill each other whenever they feel like it.
Yeah.
So conscience is not enough, society is not enough. Only if there is a God who says thou shalt not murder is murder wrong. Only if there is a God is Auschwitz wrong, is Gulag wrong, is rape wrong.
Whoa, no.
Rape, again, is an analytical statement. It's definitionally wrong. It's unlawful.
Yeah.
Just straight up. And then with Auschwitz, it's an instance of mass murder, which again is by definition wrong.
But, hang on a minute. because to the Nazis it wasn't murder.
Yeah, it
was a justified killing.
Yeah.
One of their reasons being what they believed the Jews did to Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
So Auschwitz was actually at least partially a religious-inspired response. I mean, the majority of German citizens, and indeed obviously the Nazis, were Christians.
Yeah.
And the Bible has frequently been okay with genocide.
The Bible has it all over the place. What is Noah? Right? What is the story of Noah? He annihilates everything.
He kills everyone.
That's not just a genocide of one species even. That's a complete and utter genocide. So that's good because it follows the Bible. It follows God, his own words.
Can we stop calling it the global flood and start calling it the global genocide?
Yeah, Noah and the global genocide.
But if there is no God, in the final analysis, if there isn't a moral God.
So Dennis used the words there, moral God, as well. So he said, if there is a moral God. Well, this suggests that God is adhering to morality. It's not one that God has invented.
Yes, and this, of course, brings up Euthyphro dilemma. In Plato's work, he has Socrates say to Euthyphro, is something morally good loved by God because it's morally good, or is something morally good because God says it is? Now, if it's morally good because God says it is, and that's it, then it's not morality, is it? It's just the opinion of someone. It's just an expression of, like, God's decided that this is now good or this is now bad. It's a fluke, as Prager might put it. It's completely made up. It's just completely spontaneous. So if God was to decide that Auschwitz is good, then Prager would have to say that, Auschwitz is a good thing. However, if something is morally good in and of itself, then it supersedes God.
Yeah.
It has to. If God's commanding it because it's good, it has to exist independent of God, which means that the argument just falls apart.
Yeah, we can reject his entire argument, because if he's saying there is a moral God, that also means there's a potential for an immoral God.
Yeah.
Which means you don't need God for morality.
Yeah, absolutely. He is, with that usage of his words, he is actually favouring the Euthyphro horn, wherein God commands something because it's good.
People don't want to wrap their minds around that either, because they want to think, oh, I don't need a God. Hey, I could be good without a God. Yes, there are people who could be good without belief in God. I acknowledge that. And there are bad religious people. I acknowledge that too.
People don't want to wrap their heads around that you can't have morality without God.
Yeah, why can't it just be that they have wrapped their heads around it and they just disagree with Prager?
Yeah, they're not moral considerations.
No, they are analytical statements. They're analytical propositions. Murder is wrong by definition. So
Rape is wrong by definition. You don't need this.
You don't need this. So you just realise, this is nonsense. It's not that we don't want to pay attention to it. It's that we disagree with Prager.
Those are separate questions from, is there an objective good and evil if there is no God? And the answer is no.
So, if by objective morality he means ethical imperatives that transcend us as individuals, they're outside of us.
Yeah.
Do we need that? Do we need God?
No, you definitely don't need God for it, right?
No?
You've got evolution by natural selection, right?
Yeah.
We're a social species. We're not in this game alone. We're not born with a blank slate. There's goals that are inherent within us.
Yes, so survival of the species, you're not going to, again, permit killing of everyone around you, because, well, your species is going to die.
Yeah, and
it's evolutionary imbued into us that murder is not going to be helpful to our survival.
And it's not like we think that way. Like, this is probably something that should have been clarified earlier. It's not that we think, oh, it's all about survival of our species.
Oh, no.
It doesn't work like that. For us, it's just, hey, we like stories where there's heroes, where someone sacrifices themselves for others. It's all metaphorical. It's all in a narrative. It's not this, we don't actually conceive of what's actually going on. We don't see the binary. We see rather the visuals, the pixels. So there's the first thing to be considered.
So yeah, we don't need God for an objective morality that transcends us.
No.
But when you're saying this, when you're saying morality is issued by divine edict, by God, it's not objective.
Correct.
It can't be, because it's just down to the whims of God. It's a fluke that God decided they would be this way.
Yeah.
Like you said, God could decide that, well, Auschwitz is fine.
Absolutely. Like, that's what has to be said if you take that horn of Euthyphro's dilemma.
And actually, amusingly, Christians today have proved this by reinterpreting the Bible.
Yeah.
They don't follow it, or most Christians today do not follow it as strictly as they would have 500 years ago.
Absolutely not.
Which means we've sort of accepted that morality does change.
Yeah, it's like if you look at the studies, it's showing that Christians are more accepting of, and we're just using Christians as an example. This pertains to all religions.
Of course it does, yeah.
They're more accepting of homosexuals. They think that women should have equal rights. They don't want to stone atheists. They're okay with, some people just disagree with us. Morality changes. Religion, its greatest myth, another video that I made, its greatest myth is that it's been static. For thousands of years. It hasn't. It changes with every generation. Every single generation, the objective morality of God changes. It's relative. It's absolutely as relative as the worst moral relativism that Christians and other religious people like to criticize.
But if it's tied into evolution, it is actually at least a fair bit more objective than being provided by God, because it's a bit more consistent.
Yeah.
And I would say that evolutionary speaking, God and religion have actually encouraged people to do things that are very, very detrimental to us. A great example is obviously, homosexuality. Check out Steve's video on why homosexuality makes evolutionary sense. It is really, really old. He has considerably less beard than he does now, but it's still quite
less
good
weight.
But yeah, we've essentially harmed ourselves with religion in cases like this.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's best to say that there's good religious people in spite of their religion. What's the quote?
Stephen Weinberg, he says, with or without religion, you'll have good people doing good things and bad people doing bad things. But if you want a good person to do a bad thing, that requires religion.
Yeah.
Now, I would slightly amend it. I'd say that it requires dogma and tribalism.
Yes.
Because you'll find it in political ideologies, you'll find it in all sorts of ideologies. Basically, you convince someone that they're in possession of the truth dogmatically, you're going to get good people to do bad things. Religion just tends to be the most obvious example of this. So
there we go.
There we go. This has been great fun. It'd be interesting to hear what you think. And, Ruis has a channel. It's about history. Go check it out if you're interested in history. Yeah. If you're not interested in history, go check it out anyway. You could do it with a like. You could do it with a view time.
Yeah, please do come and check me out. I've got a really, really good one coming up. It's possibly the greatest deception game of World War II.
Give him the title. Come on. You got to give him the title.
When a Dead Man Fooled Hitler.
It's such a cool story.
It's really funny as well.
Yeah. So if you're interested in history, head over there and do subscribe. And lastly, I just want to thank everybody that supports the channel via Patreon and YouTube members. Sincerely, from the bottom of my heart, thank you for allowing me to respond to this kind of stuff and create content that hopefully provides a bit of meaning and purpose in your worlds. So it's terrible, isn't it?
That's awful.
But no, sincerely, thank you very, very much. Much appreciated and much love.